Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith. Welcome to Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. I'm just doing a special show here tonight. I wanted to talk about the latest release, my book that was just released, the Veta Juvies, and so I'm just excited to be able to be here and to talk about the book and sort of what was the inspiration behind it, and fill people in a little bit about really what the aim and the goal was for writing this book, and just talk about it, a little informal chat. So I'm thankful for everybody who's tuning in, and this is a 2-hour show, so if you can't hang for the whole thing, that's okay. We'll just you just listen to whatever you can, and if you want to come back and catch the archive, that's great. Or I just appreciate everybody who's tuning into all my shows, and it's just a wonderful opportunity. I love Blog Talk Radio, and I just think it's a great way for people to, find out a little bit more behind the scenes, what's going on when somebody writes a book or, is doing anything, as far as organizations go, and all the different types of things that are out there that are helping to make this world a better place, and I think it's a great medium. So, I just figured, why not? I'll just talk about my book, and I did do another chat, actually 2 chats not too long ago, about my book, A Life of Death, The Redemption. And so, I'm glad to be here. I thank everybody for tuning in. This is just awesome, and I do appreciate all the support. It's just wonderful. And my book, just published really within the last month, Veta Juvies, is a book really geared for teens. And it's not a very long book, and I didn't want to create this huge, 500-page novel. I wanted to keep it short and simple, and just speak to teens and sort of, hopefully reach out to teenagers who may be, having some problems in their life with substance abuse, alcoholism, having problems at school, having problems at home. So many teens, have the teen years are so hard, really, for anyone to get through. And I think that, all of us, having experienced our teens, kind of relate to the whole issue of just how hard it is at some times, in our teenage years to cope with things that are going on around us and to find our place within the family, to find our place as we're growing and, growing into our adulthood, our young adulthood, to find ourselves really. And if teenagers are experiencing, a lot of neglect or abuse in the home, if they're experiencing a lot of violence within their own communities or their own, their own worlds, quote unquote, it's hard on teens, and it just makes it that much harder. Even teens who come from well-adjusted families who have a lot of support and are, given, the best of opportunities really from their parents and caregivers, and families to succeed in this world, the teen years can still be hard on even them. You know what I mean? And I think it's just because it's such a transition from growing up, from that child to to a young adult, and it's that whole transition period that responsibility comes into play, and the accountability. All of a sudden, you need to start being responsible for what you're doing, for your grades, school, for things around the home, or for your behavior. And I think as when you're going through that stage from passing from a child, to a teen and even to an older teen, there's still sometimes some problems with that, and some teenagers just don't, for whatever reason, want to take on that responsibility, and quite often get themselves into trouble and don't often make the best decisions. Even coming from good homes, I can see where this can happen. So it's even harder on teens who experience, a home where there's not a lot of support, there's not a lot of emphasis put on the teenager in the home to actually try to excel, to try to do whatever they can to better themselves, like to get an education, to go on to post-secondary school, college, university, and whatnot. And it's great to see families who actually support their teens at home, by really, not that doesn't mean to hand them everything on a silver platter, because showing them responsibility is very important, and that things cost money and things aren't free. So just to hand a kid everything is not a good idea. but really to support them and say, hey, we want the best for you, and you're our child, and you'll always be our child, and we want the very best for you as parents, and would like to see you succeed. So if we can help you to do that, then that's what we'd like to do. And I think having that option for a teenager is an amazing thing. I wouldn't know what that's about, and that's why I do a lot of writing about abuse issues and the issues of the lack of support within families, and what happens to kids and what happens to teenagers when they don't get that support. And so this book really kind of touches on that. It's a very short book. It's about half the size of my other book, A Life of Death, The Redemption. And I really got to just owe it all to Donna Shear, first of all, president of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and Sandra Dawn Potter, CEO and founder of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, for making this possible for me, because under their publishing name and under their publishing company, they have published my 2 books. And so it's just amazing. It's just awesome. And, I can't thank them enough, because it's a great opportunity to get my voice out there, which wouldn't have happened otherwise. And maybe, somebody could say, well, maybe down the road, but 20 years from now? This has been a great opportunity for my voice to be heard, and I really appreciate it. I'm going to pop the link into the chat room where you can get a hold of my book if you'd like. It's available for download as well. So if you don't want to actually send off for the book, you can just purchase the download, and it's like $3.50 US. So we kept the price really affordable, because we wanted teens to get a hold of this book. That's the whole issue, is that I didn't want to price the book so that no teens could afford to get a hold of it. I wanted it to be available for teens who may not have a lot of money, and even still, even $10 is $10 to a teenager, right? So it's like, it wasn't about the money. It's really about getting the information out to people and just sharing one more story. We all have stories to tell. We all have a story, and I just hope that my story helps people. That's all. And I really hope that my story will help other teens who are experiencing any kind of troubles in their life, whether it's teen dating issues, or substance abuse, like I was saying earlier, or abuse in the home, or know somebody who's being abused, that they would get some help and reach out and tell someone, and not allow themselves to be destroyed by whatever's going on in their life, whether it's substance abuse or whatever the situation may be. I enjoyed writing this book, and this book, it didn't take me very long to write it. It didn't take me very long to write my other book as well, because it's coming from my memories, directly from my memories. And so, it's just a matter of recalling what happened and then writing it down. So it's not like it was a hard thing to do. It was just a matter of what to include and what not to include, and because if you try to include the whole thing, it would be a 10,000-page novel, and no teen really has time to be reading a 10,000-page novel. I wanted to keep it short and to the point, and make it a quick read for teens, so that they don't have to spend a year trying to get through a book, And so I just started the book out. It was really based on one summer with my friends, and I changed the names of my friends and myself even in this book, but it is my story, and it's just one summer that there was just a lot going on, and it was one summer that affected us all in many ways. The whole crowd of kids that we hung around with were all experiencing their own types of issues, with whether it was substance abuse or abuse in the home. Quite a lot of my friends were also growing up in abusive environments. Some were not as physically abused as myself, and some were actually abused worse than myself. And so, we sort of hung around each other for a lot of support. And because, that's what happens when there isn't a whole lot of support in the home. Children will look for that support somewhere else. So we all kind of latched onto each other, because we all, we were all kind of the kids, kind of the outcast kids, the ones from the other side of the track that, we were kind of lower middle class. So we weren't poverty level, even though some of us were just above the poverty line. We weren't poverty level, so we didn't come from that side of the tracks, but we came from this one middle section that was the kids that were in trouble. the kids that were out there causing problems, doing a lot of drugs, stealing, just, basically wreaking havoc on the city. And that, can happen in any town, any city, anywhere. So this book really could be any group of teens in any city, anywhere. And, we weren't the teens that were out like killing people or shooting people or anything like that. That's a whole other side of that whole thing, the serious gang issues in LA and Texas and Phoenix and whatnot. We were just a group of kids who didn't have any support in the home and were experimenting with a lot of drugs and didn't have really any goals, anything set that would motivate us to try to do something for ourselves, to push ourselves, right? So, when there's nothing in the home that's going to do that for you, when there's no support, that's what happens to teenagers. They just lose. They basically just don't have anything to kind of propel them to want to do better, to want to succeed at anything. I didn't want to go to college or university because I had a hard enough time trying to get through regular school, So to me, going back to school was just not the thing I wanted to do at that time. And I knew I also didn't want to, kill myself with drug use, but I was also really bent on destroying myself because that's what my parents had really shown me how to do. And so, I thought, hey, they're destroying me, so I'll just finish the job. And that because as a teenager, sometimes teens have attitudes that, are pretty snarky and quite often self-destructive, where and if they don't get help with that, they can do some damage and follow through with that stuff, and that's the whole issue. I hung around with my friends were all really good friends. They did a lot of crazy stuff, but yet they would support me, and they realized what kind of home I grew up in, so they were, and what I was experiencing while I was hanging out with them, and so they quite often were a little, protective of me, even though they were younger than myself. A lot of my friends, and most of my friends actually, in my teen years, my sort of middle to late teens, were younger than me by a couple of years, and all the older teens that I used to hang around with when I was about 12 and 13 years old were gone. So I used to hang around with a lot of older people, and then those people were gone out of my life, and then within about a short time, within a year, I really had no friends, and then all of a sudden I started hanging around with these kids on the block that I wouldn't have hung around with normally, who were a couple of years younger than me, and I knew who they were. I mean, I had been at their house for years and hanging around, but we didn't pal around until that summer. And so that's why I chose this summer to sort of bring it out and start talking about it, because it was a summer that I think any teen could experience, and just out running around if there's no direction from the parents, to direct their time during the summer to say, hey, you should take up a sport, or you should take up a musical instrument or something, or get involved with something, some extracurricular activities outside of the school, summer programs for teens and stuff like this. Teens will go off and look for their own entertainment, and our entertainment was all about getting high. So we were all looking for whatever we could get our hands on, really. None of us had a lot of money, and so money was hard to come by because none of us were working. And so, we would do whatever we had to do, to get a few bucks for whatever we wanted to get, And, that's what teens will do if they don't have anyone, a lot of times, if they don't have any support. They sort of fall in with people who are doing this kind of stuff. It's exciting at the time, your friends and hanging around, and it's almost like they become your family. And really, honestly, these group of people, these group of kids that I was hanging around with were really were my family, because my other family was not there for me. So, I spent a lot more time kind of concerned about my friends than I was about my family, and a lot more time hanging around with them. So we would hang out all the time when we weren't at home. And I tried to stay away from home as much as possible in the summertime, because it generally ended up violent, because my mom couldn't handle having me around the house even for, a couple of hours, right? It would generally turn violent. So unless I stayed in my room, or hid away somewhere, if I was just silent and just not out where she could get a hold of me, it was all right. But as soon as I needed to go to the kitchen to get something, or had something to ask her, for instance, it could turn violent. So I generally stayed out of the house as much as possible. And but I wanted to be part of the family. I never really wanted to be. I talk a lot about that in my other book, Life of Death and Redemption. That I didn't want to be removed from the home. Had the opportunity to be sort of, the intervention to happen, right? And I turned it down, and I really sort of pleaded with these people not to do that, because I didn't want to be removed from my home, because my mom had been for the couple of years prior to had been threatening to throw me out, and had been, well, she actually was throwing me out, sort of tossing me out and saying get out, and she wouldn't make me stay out, but she didn't want me there, and I knew that. So it would hurt my feelings, because I was the only child that she did that to. I was the last of seven children she had, and I was the last one born, and I just felt so rejected from that family, because I knew she didn't want me there. And, of course, she wanted everybody else there. She never said she wanted to throw my sister out or any of my brothers, and they were all up to no good, doing prison terms and, hurting people and doing a lot of drugs and causing a lot of problems for her and for themselves, right? So she never threatened to throw them out. And so I think that's what the mindset was behind that, was that I really didn't want to be, I wanted to be part of that, I wanted to be loved, I wanted to be part of that family and accepted, and it was something that I was really fighting to obtain within that family. So as far as my position went, in that family as a teenager growing up, I really, it devastated me that my mom didn't want me there, and that she was always trying to push me out, and was saying that she would just give me up to foster care or whatever when the situations would arise where, people would say, we're going to intervene and we're going to get her some help. And of course I was just like fighting it all the time, saying, no, I don't want to leave. I don't want to be removed from my home. I want my parents to care about me, and it's pretty sad when it comes to that, you know what I mean? Well, I was willing to take the abuse and willing to put up with the violence in the home, just to be part of that family. And I think that's a lot of times that's the case for teens, So it's very hard on kids when they're growing up in a violent and abusive situation, and that's all they know, and they still love their parents. That's what happens, right? The bond that they feel, that they're willing to take the abuse. And I think that goes quite along the same lines of domestic violence and abuse, right? Partners stay in those relationships because they love their partner, whoever it is, who's abusing them, and they think, oh, it'll change, or maybe one day they'll stop and they'll realize how much they're hurting me and they'll love me, or, that was my thing, because I was quite often pretty mouthy as a kid and would tell my parents stuff like, you should love your children, and you shouldn't be doing this to us. You shouldn't have been doing this to me. And of course, it wouldn't get me very far. But, I really was looking for that love and that nurturing that I didn't get. And, really it was quite devastating. So I started to turn a little bit sour, in the whole thing, and really just thought, oh, who cares? My attitude sort of changed as an older teen. Just started not caring about myself, not caring about life in general, and really was I didn't care if I did too many drugs and overdosed or anything like that. I sort of became like my brothers, more just further down than I was before. You know what I mean? It just sort of takes its toll, and very hard position for teens to be in. And I know that there's so many teens out there who, experience this stuff. So that's where I wanted this book to be sort of a help for teens who may be experiencing some of that, and just know, they're not alone, and that they should get help if they can, and whatever kind of help that is, just talking to somebody to help, make sense of their world and what's happening, and if they're involved in substance abuse and whatnot, to make sure that they do reach out and get some help with that, And a lot of my friends, I did mention in the book there that, some of my friends were into heavy duty drugs, and we're talking cocaine and crack and crank and speed and all that stuff, very deadly stuff, and some of them were shooting up, and they would overdose, and one of my friends was killed and shot down in his driveway, and another one of my friends was murdered, and her brother actually was also heavily involved in drugs, and he would quite often overdose. And the doctors told him if he didn't stop doing what he was doing, that he would be dead. He wouldn't survive like very many more years at the rate that he was going, because he was shooting up and really a heavy duty intravenous drug user. And so these are the kind of people I was hanging out with, and that we would take chances that most people would think is absolutely crazy, and it was crazy, and it was scary. And, we would get ourselves into trouble. But this is coming just a little bit after this story. This particular summer, we were all still kind of young and, not innocent, but still kind of young and not really into any real trouble, but just small stuff that kind of led up to the stuff that actually really affected my friends. And I was lucky enough to get out and to make the decisions that I needed to stop doing drugs and get off drugs and get my life together, and realizing that, I was never going to have any real support from my family. I had to do it myself, and I thought, well, I have to do it for me because I have to care enough about myself, and I want to change this thing, because otherwise I'm going to continue on this road, and it could kill me very well, could kill me as well. And my brother had died when I was 20 years old. My brother committed suicide, and he was 33 years old, and he committed suicide and was a drug addict. And I thought, well, that could happen to me, So about the age of 21, I got off drugs, but a lot of my friends didn't. But this book actually takes place when I'm 15, and I started it at a point where the summer had just started, and teens, like, you finish off a school year, and summer starts, and it's like the party is on, and if teenagers are already out there partying and have been partying for a while, they're looking for the parties, they're looking for the fun, the excitement, of hanging out with their friends and stuff. And so I had this one friend, and in the book I called her Jo, and she was a good friend to me. And she's, I don't talk to her, and I can't find her. I hope that she's still alive and that she's doing really well. And but she was one of my best friends in the whole world, and we hung around like every day. We palled around and did everything together for quite a few years. And we had a lot of issues in our lives. She was growing up in a home that, her mom loved her and everything, and her sister, her mom had two daughters, and but she was more interested in her boyfriends. I have to be honest. Like, she was more interested in these guys that she would have around, and these men. She always picked the wrong men. So these men were always abusive, and they were never nice guys, right? They were always looking to get rid of the girls, push the girls away from the mother so they could get the mother just all to themselves. Very controlling, very, and I grew up in a domestic violence situation, so I recognized their behavior as, sort of another bad set of behaviors. And I thought, well, my friend was suffering as well, like I knew that she was, and her younger sister. And so, these girls, they weren't necessarily being physically abused, but there was a whole lack of support there, because the mother really was more interested in these guys that she would find and then end up marrying. And actually, I don't know how many times she was married, but all of them ended up being abusive to her, and some of them actually ended up being abusive to the girls. So my friends, right? And it was just horrible. So this woman was married and divorced so many times, right, and just could not choose a good partner for herself. And I don't know if maybe she grew up abused and that's all she kind of knew, or what. But she did love her kids, and I knew that. And she was a sheriff. She was a tough lady, and so you would kind of think that she would have been able to take care of herself in these situations where these men would beat her up. But actually, that was not the case, because even though she was a sheriff and knew how to fight back and knew how to fire a gun and knew how to restrain people, these men would still beat her up, and she would let them do it. So it was kind of, it was a bad scene for my friend to witness that, because here her mom's supposed to be this tough sheriff lady, and yet she would let these men push her around and treat her really badly, right? Because I don't know, if it was a low self-esteem or a confidence issue or whatever, but that's what would happen within their home. So I knew my friend was having a lot of problems at home, and a lot of trouble with that, and she was a good kid, and she was a couple of years younger than me, and I called her Jo in the book. And she was my best friend for a long time, and I still love her very much. A lot of things happened between us that, brought us kind of closer together, because we had these situations arise where, we would rely on each other, because really we didn't have anybody else to really rely on who was there for us, even within her home. Her mom was kind of not really there for them, right, because she was more about her boyfriends. So we would really rely on each other for everything. Like if I was having a hard day, I could go over to her house and we would sit and talk about it. And if she was having a hard time, she'd come over, talk to me, on my porch. We generally didn't hang around in my house because my mom didn't like her, and my mom didn't like her because she had a mouth on her. And my mom, in the A Life of Death or Redemption, my mom was beating me up one time, and my friend was there, Joe, who I'm calling Joe. Her name was Guy. She actually told my mom there's laws against child abuse, and my mom told her to get out of the house, and I totally remember that. And so my mom didn't really like her because she had a mouth on her, and she was quite often speaking back and talking back, and my mom didn't like that. So, because we were not allowed to talk back, there would be definite trouble if we talked back to my mom. So she didn't like this girl talking back to her, so she didn't really like her to come in the house and come around. So if my friend came over, we would split. See, we'd go, and then of course we'd have the opportunity to go get high or whatever, because we were always looking for some place to go get stoned. And so we spent years doing that, and we had all these hopes and dreams. We wanted to be in a band, in a rock band, and we were going to be rockers, and we didn't have any normal kind of dreams, like go to school and raise a family and, buy a home and nothing like that. It was all these grandiose things, like that never would happen, you know what I mean? But it was good to have a friend like that, somebody to hang around and just to care. Because otherwise, without her, I would have been pretty lonely, because my other friend had just been killed, been hit by a car. And so my best friend, so she had been killed the year before, and then I started hanging around with this new girl, and if she hadn't been there, I think, I don't know what would have happened really, because I was very depressed. So just having somebody to hang out with that cared about me and, was there for me, it was just awesome. She would invite me to her house for dinner, and I'd stay over there some nights just hang around, and her mom didn't mind if I stayed over and stuff. And so if things were really bad at my house, a lot of times I would sleep over at her house on the couch. And then some people actually thought that our relationship was that we were a couple, that we were both, bisexual or something or whatever. I think people kind of thought that we had that sort of relationship, but actually we didn't. We were just really good friends. And it's kind of funny that people actually thought that, but it's just because we did everything together. We were always around. We would do everything together as much as possible, and spent hours and hours together. So I think people kind of thought we had something going, but we didn't. We were both very much interested in guys, and we were just too shy. She was still a couple years younger than me, and I was just not into having any guy in my life, because I had crushes on guys, but I could not get. I had such self-esteem problems, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't even allow somebody to touch me. If they touched me, I would just cringe, because I had been so abused my whole life, you know what I mean, by so many people, that I really didn't trust anybody. So even a guy, wanting to go, hang out and kiss or whatever, sort of make out sessions really just creeped me out, because I had many problems with my own sexuality, right? And so, I had these crushes on guys, but I would never go try to pursue it. And my friend had crushes on guys too, but she was a couple years younger than me. She wasn't quite grown into her kind of out from her sort of baby looks, and so she felt kind of like an ugly duckling or something. And I would just tell her, no, you're beautiful, and you have all these beautiful things about you, and you just wait, when you get older, you're going to be a knockout. And we would try to compliment each other and try to make each other feel better. And I think that without that support, nobody would have been telling us these things, and we wouldn't have had that from anybody. So it was good. It was a good friendship, and we really relied on each other for a lot, whereas our own family just wasn't there for us, you know what I mean? So that's where I started the book out, because my friend was, she was a lot more aggressive than I was. She was a lot more of an aggressive type. I was more the type to be in the background like a snake. If somebody bothered me, I might not necessarily let them know that they bothered me, but then I'd go and retaliate later, sneaky, like, try to kind of, I don't know. It was just my nature to be like that. And she was more aggressive in your face right now if she didn't like something, you know what I mean? Like she was the type that if somebody said something to her, she would quite often hit them. She would chase people down later when she got a vehicle and actually pull them out of their vehicles and beat them up. She was a very violent girl. She had a way more violent streak than I did, and she was a couple years younger than me. So I mean, she had some hard times trying to to realize that, hey, that's not right. It's not right to hurt people, to abuse people, to to do these things to people. And later on, actually, when we were in our 20s, we used to talk about that stuff and say, man, I can't believe the stuff that we used to do and how horrible, But she had a lot of anger issues, and I think it was from watching what was happening to her mom at home. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that her dad was an alcoholic and had abused them when the family was still together, and her parents were divorced after a while, but because of the abuse, right? So, but he was still allowed to see the kids, but I don't think that there was a whole lot of love there because they witnessed their dad beating up their mother, and he would hit them too. So there was abuse in the home, and I think that she had a lot of anger management problems because of that. And I myself did too, but mine were just a little bit different, the way I handled things. I always seemed kind of calm and collected on the outside, but on the inside I'd be like, I'm going to get you, you sucker. You know what I mean? And I'd be plotting and planning how I would get these people. And, sometimes I'd follow through, sometimes I wouldn't. So people didn't necessarily like me either growing up, because my friend and I were quite aggressive types, and we wouldn't want to hurt anybody really, but we'd scare them. So we were almost the bullies, right? So we'd be running around the neighborhood, scaring kids and freaking these younger kids out and picking on anybody who seemed to be a little bit weaker than us, right? And that's what happens. That's what happened in my home. I was the weak one, so I was obviously picked on. And, you just take that out and you become the bully. And a lot of times teens who experience violence in their home sometimes don't withdraw within themselves. They'll take that and they will become the bully. They'll become the abuser, right? And that's the whole cycle of abuse, right? So we would, pick on neighborhood kids and stuff that we didn't really hang out with and didn't like that much. And we had a couple of situations where we almost got into these huge fights with like 20, 30 people. And it was pretty scary. It was pretty crazy because they could have done some damage, but we actually managed to talk our way out of it. But, we'd get into these situations because of her mouth, and she had a pretty big mouth. And but I just loved hanging around with her because she was aggressive, and she was always telling me, you need to stand up for yourself. You need to. And I was like 2 years older than her, and I was already going to be a senior in high school. And here's this young kid telling me, that I need to stand up for myself against my parents and tell them to stop pushing me around. And that was never something that entered my mind really. I wouldn't, I just didn't feel, I didn't know that I should, right? It didn't occur to me that I could sit there and say, hey, I don't deserve to be abused, and but that was her mentality, was like, you need to say something, you need to tell your parents they need to stop treating you like that. And so I learned a lot from her, because she really drilled it into my head that I should not be allowing them to treat me like that. I really didn't deserve it, and that I should be treated better, right? So she was a good friend to have around, and I liked her. She was very much protective of me. So even though she was a couple years younger, she was almost my protector, because she was more of a aggressive type, right? But that meant being an aggressive type, she almost always didn't make the right decisions, and so we'd be out, messing around and getting in trouble. And so I started the book out one night when we were hanging around on the street, and it was late, and there was no real light out. It was really early in the morning, and there was just like one street light down at the other side of the street, and it was very dark, and we saw a police car, and she whistled really loud, and it flipped him off, and we took off, and we were running, and we actually hid from him. So that's where I started the book. And I totally remember this happening, and I can remember what we were talking about. And I remember just laying in that grass thinking, oh, my God, if they catch us, we're so busted. And, because I could just imagine these cops taking me back to my house and the trouble that I would have been in, had the police been bringing me home. I always had to try to really be careful, because I didn't have to be in trouble to be abused. So if I was in trouble, for sure there'd be some real problems. So I was always trying to stay out of trouble, and trying not to get caught. I was always in trouble, just trying not to get caught. But my friend didn't care. She was just like, my mom's a sheriff, and she'll take care of this. And so she was funny, and we had always ended up in some really crazy stuff together, and it was really fun. But the thing is it was scary too, because we weren't always doing what we should be doing. We were always out running around in the middle of the night, which I would never suggest. Parents, really, you can't let your children do that sort of stuff if you're listening to this. There's so many sick people out there. We used to run into people because we did run around quite a bit at night, late at night, out by ourselves, hanging out. And we used to run into people who would try to do these strange things. Like this one guy one night saw me and my friends all hanging out, and it was late, like, it was probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and he stopped his vehicle and got out and slapped all of us across the face. And then he told us, "Did you know that I could take you all and I could kill you? And I could rape you and I could kill you?" And we all looked at him and we were like, "No." And my friend was like, "Oh, my mom's a sheriff." That was Joe. And we were sitting there going, "Oh, my God, this guy's a psycho." And he's like, "Go home." And I was like, "Oh, my God." So we all took off, right, and went back to my friend's place and hung out. And the thing is anything could have happened, right? We were totally vulnerable. As much as we thought we were so tough and we were so cool, anything could have happened. And we were pretty lucky most of the time that nothing did happen. Because, any time a young teen is out running around by themselves or with a group of other teens, anything can happen. And so you don't want to encourage that with your kids, It was actually pretty scary. And when I think about it, if I had children, I wouldn't want them out running around in the middle of the night like that, because there's so many child sexual predators out there and pedophiles who are just looking for teens who are out running around in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? They're out looking for whoever they can get their hands on, right? It doesn't matter who they are, whether it's an adult or a child. A lot of times these people, they'll assault adults too. These sexual predators, right? They'll just assault whoever they can get their hands on. Horrible. So, that's the whole issue. Is it was dangerous. And but we thought we were so cool and that we were so tough, and we could handle it. And so we'd be hanging out doing these crazy things in the middle of the night. So I sort of just wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I went into a little bit about the behavior that my parents were, showing towards me and at the time and towards each other. They were still fighting all the time and they were still violent, and there wasn't a whole lot of real support. My sister was still living in the home, but she was busy. She was working all the time, and she was working, and she was already graduated. She had a boyfriend, and so she was rarely home. She would just come home to shower, to sleep. She wouldn't really eat there. She never really ate at home, and she would just be gone with her friends or whatever. So she wasn't really around and wasn't there for a support system for me. And when she was there, we were quite often arguing, so we weren't necessarily helping each other out. And so, I was pretty much alone in that home with my parents, and all my other siblings were gone by that time. The last one had to leave the country because my brother had gotten in trouble for robbing a pharmacy, and he didn't hurt anybody, but he dropped his wallet, so the police knew exactly who it was, and they came and they picked him up, and they said you can go to drug rehab center or you can go to prison, right? So he went to a rehab center in Texas, and he was only there for about 3 weeks, and he escaped, and it was like just a minimal security thing, and then he came home back to Albuquerque, and he was hiding in the house. The FBI came by and they were like, "We know he's here." My mom was like, "Oh no, I haven't seen him," and he was there in the house hiding out. And the FBI said, "Look, he's got to leave the country. If we find him, he's going to prison, right? If we don't find him because he's left the country, well then whatever. But he better be gone because the next time we come back, he's going to prison, right?" So my brother had to go to Canada, so he moved. He took off, and my parents bought him a one-way ticket, and he was gone, and I never did see him again. He lived for many years, but I never did have the opportunity to see him again. And finally, at the age of 43, he died of a drug overdose up here in Canada, in Calgary, where I live right now. And very sad. I didn't see him from the time I was about 13, 14 to 28. So I didn't see him for 14 years. So pretty sad. That was the last time I saw my bro. And he was gone. So I was on my own in the home there with my parents, and their behavior was pretty pathetic. They had always been very abusive to each other and always been abusive to me. And my parents were using any excuse to lash out, things that really I deserved a timeout. Somebody should have just said, "Okay, we're going to take a timeout. We're going to talk about this as a family." Well, our family never did that. So, we never came together on anything, and my parents especially didn't come together on anything to discuss anything or, to try to help their kids out, right? It was like if you were doing something that just causing them more grief, then you were going to get in trouble for it, and it was always sometimes a physical beating in there with it. So I did mention some of the stuff that had happened, and it kind of coincides with my book, A Life of Death and Redemption, because some of it's sort of the same story, you know what I mean? But I just wanted this one summer. I wanted to actually just talk about this one summer and, you know, what had happened between my friends and I, because some crazy things had been going on. And, you know, so my friends in the meantime knew that, you know, the way I was being treated. And, you know, they because they witnessed it, you know, they were all there for it. You know, it was quite embarrassing, you know, to know that your parents were treating you like that. But in the meantime, there wasn't much, you know, that I felt like I could really do about it. And so I just developed an attitude that I didn't care. You know, I didn't care the way they were treating me. So I was like, whatever. So it kind of made me feel a little bit tougher, a little bit more, you know, like a bad kid. You know what I mean? Like one of these kids that you would think, you know, oh, look at them and they're so tough, you know what I mean? Well, I was really not tough, but I had an attitude about me that was, because I think that's just how I sort of wanted people to see me, so that I wouldn't have, you know, I would be the one to say, you know, stay away from me because I'll end up hurting you and you won't be able to hurt me. So I think I developed this attitude that was kind of, I don't know, offensive to most people. You know, I think people found me to be kind of a hard case, you know, kind of like not a very nice person. And, you know, I came across as that way, and I think I did it as it was a protective measure, really for myself, because I really couldn't take any more abuse from anybody. I was just tired of it. And it did kind of push me to be a little bit, you know, disrespectful to people. So quite often, you know, bosses and whatnot, if I was working places, you know, I was very much a disrespectful, you know, person to them. And I think it's just because I didn't care. I was like, you know what, I don't care. I've had enough garbage from enough people. And, you know, I'm the one that's going to be coming out on top here, you know what I mean? And it's a hard place to be. So within the home, of course, I couldn't be like that. But outside, I was. So it was a little bit almost playing two different sides of things, you know what I mean? So, you know, I kind of wanted to go into the details of sort of my summer there, you know, where my mom would be sitting at the kitchen table and I'd go in the morning and grab my breakfast and, you know, say hi to her. That'd be pretty much the only time that I'd see her to talk to her would be, you know, in the morning when I'd be getting my stuff, because then, of course, I'd be gone for the rest of the day, right? And so that's kind of the way the whole summer went. And that's kind of how most of my summers went, because I tried to stay out of the home because it was just safer. So, you know, I'd go get my breakfast and then head out for the day, right? And see whatever we can get into. So we were always running around, getting into these adventures and having these adventures, even within the block if we were staying on the block. You know, quite often we were gone off the block, but sometimes we'd hang around on the block just because there's nothing else to do. And, you know, we'd be running around through people's backyards and spying on people. And, you know, it was kind of interesting. We knew who all the neighbors were. We all lived there for years and years. I grew up on that block. I was born on that block. I was born, you know, and then lived on that block my whole life till I was, except for minus the one period of time when we moved to Canada and then came back and lived in this one house for 4 years. But when we moved back onto the block, we moved next door to the house that we owned. My parents owned this one house and then sold it when we moved to Canada. Then we moved back, lived on this other street just a few blocks over for 4 years, and then we moved back onto the street right next door to the house that we used to own. So it's kind of funny because we'd be looking at that house going, that used to be our house. We used to own that house. And but my dad sold it for a van and a couple $1,000 or something. It was kind of crazy, right out from underneath my mom without even asking her, you know, she was pretty devastated. But they never did own a home again, and they never had the opportunity to ever buy a home again, right? They just didn't have that chance, where when they first bought that other house, it was really cheap and they could afford it. So, yeah, it was kind of, we were just renting on the block, but we were back on the block and everybody knew who we were. And so I knew all the kids, you know, and we hung out and we'd run through the yards and just hang out and get into a little bit of trouble and sometimes a bit destructive. You know, we had a friend who was always in trouble and had spent some time in juvenile hall, and he was a good kid. He had a good heart, but trouble just found him. That's what we figured, you know, talking about it later on in life. My friend Joe, who I have named Joe in the book, we would talk about this guy. And he was a nice guy. He was a nice kid. And him and his brother, and they just, trouble found them. They didn't even need to go looking for it. Trouble just surrounded them. They were always in trouble. And it's like they could not make a good decision to save their lives. And, you know, it's kind of unfortunate because he would always be in trouble, and he was a good kid. He'd like to laugh. He liked to have fun. And I just think that he maybe that was just about the only way that he could get any attention at home, because his mom was really into herself. She was a bodybuilder, so yeah, she was into her own self. Like, she was one of these self-worshippers. Like, she had her own pictures all over her wall of herself naked in the living room. Like, we went to his house, and because he just lived a couple blocks over it, and we went into his house one time, and she had pictures of herself nude all over the living room walls, and she was a bodybuilder, and she just thought she was so cool. And I didn't like her because she was quite often hitting her kids, and so this young guy, quite often showed up with bruises and marks on his face, and he'd be kind of upset because his mom had just slapped him around or beat him up. Well, she's a bodybuilder, see, so she could take on her kids no problem. And she was kind of mean, you know what I mean? Like, she was kind of like my mom, right? Just not a very nice person. And I to be honest with you, think my mom was probably nicer than her mom. And my mom, wasn't all that nice, but I think that her heart was in a little bit more better place than this guy's mom. And this guy, he ended up in a lot of trouble, and he ended up in juvenile hall and stuff. And he would tell us about some of the things that would happen in the juvenile hall to the kids that were in this place where they were staying. That was just horrible. He showed us scars on his legs where the guys that were actually working in this place actually stomped on them with golf shoes, with the points on the golf shoes. And so he had all these little point stab marks all over his legs from these guys who would stomp on him. And he would tell of these horrible situations where they would beat them with phone books and things like that, so that they couldn't really prove that there was any bruising. They'd throw like a light mattress over them and beat them up with phone books and stuff, because it was really hard to prove the abuse then, because they couldn't see it. It was all internal. And so these guys, they were abused in these juvenile hall, sort of the group homes and whatnot, where he would be put. And so he was being abused at home. He was being abused wherever he was at, and he sure didn't deserve it. And I think it really it played a big part in causing him to be the way that he was. So he's quite often getting in trouble with the law and doing stupid things. So I mentioned a couple of things that he did that in the book that like destruction of property. He was a very destructive person, and he would quite often destroy other people's property and stuff. And I didn't think it was cool, because I kind of looked at other people's property. Hey, that's their stuff. We shouldn't really destroy it. But he just couldn't make that decision. He thought, no, why not? This is what we need to do. And of course, I wouldn't want any part of it, so I'd go home. But my mom, because we lived on a block and all this stuff would happen on the block, associated the fact that I was hanging around with these kids, so she would think that I was actually part of it. And I actually took a couple of beatings because of it. And so, even though I had nothing to do with it, right? So I was, what can you do? You know what I mean? I think I think I was just a good punching bag for her. You know what I mean? She would just use any excuse. I think she was just so fed up, and she obviously didn't want me to get into trouble. But the thing is that's not the way to handle it, right? It's better to sit down and talk to your kids than beat on them, right? But unfortunately, some parents can't make that decision properly. You know what I mean? So, just pretty bad. You know what I mean? And they went on to do some horrible things. Him and his brother. I called him John in the book, and his younger brother both ended up in trouble. And the last time I heard from him, or heard about him, our friend, he was in prison in San Francisco for, forget what it was. I think he robbed and stabbed a pizza guy or something like that. I don't know if he killed him or what, but he was in San Quentin. And so, yeah, he's doing prison time. And I don't know what he's doing now, if he's even alive or not, but who knows. But these were my friends. And, you don't want to see people's lives go that way. And these teens, I was the oldest one, and even though these guys were all a little bit younger than me, I would try to help them out, like talk to them and say, look, you guys, you don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to get in any more trouble than you're already in. Even though we were all still partying and all still hanging around and doing these drugs and whatnot, I still wanted the best for my friends. And I didn't want to see them ruin their lives, you know what I mean? And I could see this kid going completely in the wrong direction. He just seemed to be doing these things that were a lot more against the law than what we were doing. You know what I mean? He was into more heavy duty stuff, and I was really concerned for him and his brother. And my friend's Jo, her younger sister, who I called Rebecca in the book. She was a couple years younger than her sister, so she was like 4 years younger than me. She was the same age as this guy's younger brother, and they actually hung around. So it was like the next generation of the Veta Juvies, right? They started hanging around, and later on we found out that they were really into some really bad stuff, like breaking into people's like drug dealers' homes and getting a hold of guns and drugs and whatnot, then going and robbing people with Uzis and they you know these heavy duty automatic machine guns and whatnot. And like we found out about this later, that this is what they had been doing, and this was the next generation of the Veta Juvies. These were all the kids that just came a few years after us, right? So we weren't really doing anything like that. We were kind of causing a little bit of trouble and doing some stupid things, but these guys were doing some absolutely crazy things, and even we were shocked. We were like, hey, we weren't out there doing that stuff, you know what I mean? So that was the difference between the violence. It just escalated that much more between the generations. So it's really something that people think doesn't, you know, oh, that's not reality, or, you know, how could that happen, right? Well, it does happen, and, you know, it's really sad because if these kids had support at home, you'd hope that they wouldn't be running around robbing drug dealers and taking their guns and their drugs and going out with Uzis and robbing other people and stuff like this. This is what we see. This is what we know that happens. And, you know, it's hard enough for teens growing up in these homes where there is some support. You know, it's hard enough for them to stay on the straight and narrow and not get themselves into trouble. And then yet, you know, you have a bunch of teens who are not getting any support from their family whatsoever, and their families don't care, and their parents don't care what they're doing with themselves at all, unless they just tell them, okay, don't get into trouble, because if you do, you're in trouble. But there's no other support there to say, hey, you know, what are you doing with your life? You know, you really should do something a little bit better, you know, and incorporate your friends in on it. You know, help them start a band, or help them, you know, if they're into sports, help them get into sports, or whatever. Even if you don't have a lot of money as parents, you know, because sometimes people just don't have the funds and resources. There are free activities out there that youth can get involved in. That, you know, with parks and recreation during the summertime, where you can have, you know, you could say all your friends could go get involved in that. You know, you got to start out early. You can't wait till they already start doing the drugs and start, you know, getting involved with the gang activities or getting involved with the illegal activities. You got to catch them before that happens, because once they get a taste of that, it's really hard to go back and try to be the other kid who's innocent and who, you know, because you can't. You've already been on the other side. So it's, you know, you feel like, I wouldn't want to do that when I'm doing this. You know, I found this is like, it's like they find their place and they feel like, okay, this is my place. This is what I'm doing. You know, and, you know, it doesn't do much good later on to try to support a teen that you have not been supporting their whole lives. And a lot of times parents actually start to panic at that time because they're thinking, well, look what happened. Look at our teen. Look what our teen is doing. And it's like, well, what have you been doing for them at all your whole life, like, or their whole lives? Have you been supporting them all the way through, or are you just now freaking out because they're just getting into trouble and this is something new? You know, parents really have to get a clue and a grip that they need to start when the children are in the womb, finding out what they're going to do to help their kids to succeed. Before they're even born, they need to start making a plan to say, hey, we're not going to let our kids fall through the cracks and end up on drugs, and you know, we're going to be there for them, and we're going to promote the positive lifestyle. So we have to do this ourselves. We're going to have to be involved. You know, parents need to set the best example for their children, and, you know, make sure that their kids know that, hey, this is the way to live, not that way. You know, you don't want to get involved in all this violent activity and drug use and all this stuff and get yourself killed and in trouble, because to a lot of teens that is exciting. And let me tell you, I knew a lot of, because I grew up like that and I spent my whole youth like that, and it just got, the more it escalated, the more exciting it was. The more near trouble we were in, the better it was. So we were always looking for that high, that extreme, unsafe lifestyle type thing, you know, and would put ourselves in these really risky situations because it was a high to go along with our other high, which, you know what I mean. So it was really bad, and, you know, once a teen starts doing that, it's really hard to change their mind to go back to trying to get involved in some after-school sports situation, or, you know, getting them involved in some sort of art or, you know, music or something like that. A lot of times they're like, no, I've got my friends, and this is what I'm doing, you know. And so even if a parent tries to care later on, sometimes it's just too late. And I think, you don't want to let that happen to your children. You have to set the best example for them and then promote a healthy lifestyle, right? It's so important. And a lot of teens, the way they go, you can just see it. Some parents would sit there and say, oh, I've been a good parent and I've been a good mother. Well, have you? For sure. Because why would these teens be out on the street running around doing what they're doing? Some, I guess, would slip through the cracks and end up. The only thing is I can go by example because I had some friends who, in high school, at the time when this book was written, who were, when I wrote this book, so I was about 15, 16 years old, these kids were so loved in their homes. They were so looked after. I didn't hang around with just these people. I had some other friends at school because these kids were younger than me. So the kids in my classroom, none of these kids were in my classroom because these kids that I was hanging out with were all 2 years younger than me. And so in my classroom, I had some other friends who were not drug users, who were, really coming from really good homes. None of them were wealthy or anything like that. Their parents cared about them and really, really set a good example. Tried to make sure that their kids knew that they should go to university or go on to college after high school, and tried to set them up for that. And their kids their parents really cared for them. I met their parents and I really liked them very much. They were nice people. I used to be invited over to their homes too, right? So I got to see some normal interaction with quite a few different families, right? And I noticed the difference, at their homes, right? It's like, oh, this home's not nothing like my home, you know what I mean? And then I noticed the difference between their homes and my friends' homes. And my friends' homes were a lot like my home. So that's the thing. I had some other types of friends too who were doing quite well. And I thought that I'm surprised they actually had me for their friend because because I was a drug user and I was always quite often stoned at school and high and doing crazy things. But I think these kids liked me. I don't know why, but they kind of picked. I think they were not the popular crowd, and so I think they thought I was funny and just sort of picked me up to be one of their friends. So I had some great friends, and I really loved them all. And these kids grew up in some really good homes. They did not do drugs, and they were not influenced by me to do drugs, right? So I would never offer those guys any drugs, you know what I mean? Because I knew what kind of home they came from, and I knew that they were not into that stuff. And they would never ask me for any, right? So, I was just always doing my own thing with my own friends outside of school, but I sometimes hung around with these kids too. So I got to see the difference between the families, and their families were always supporting them to be involved in all this stuff. Like one of them was into music, and she played the violin, and her parents actually, had paid for her for some violin lessons, and she was actually really quite a good violinist. And then my other friend, her parents, I don't think they had as much money. They had more children, but they were really good parents. They were just nice people, and I think they really cared for their kids. They were putting one of their sons through college, and my friend, she was looking to go to college next after she graduated. And so, she just lived kind of like this normal life, And then another friend of ours, she actually grew up sexually abused by her father, and so did her younger sister, which was just, we found out later on because she did tell me this. She actually disclosed this to me after we graduated, and she was a straight A student, and she went on to Berkeley University to be an engineer, civil engineer. And she, in high school, she was... I didn't realize. I knew something was wrong because I could always tell she was upset, and she was kind of shy, and she was quite often upset and really always concerned with her grades. She had to have like the A+. She could not have anything more less than an A+. If she got like an A, there'd be a problem. So one time she got an A- or something, or an A on her report card, and she actually went to the teacher and made it so that she made such a fuss about it that it wasn't an A+. That she got to do some special test or something with him, and he changed her grade to an A+, because she had to have the number one top A+ grades all the way through, because she had this vision of herself going on to, to try to get out of this abusive environment that she was in, which was being raped by her father. I think it was her real father, and her incest, right, and her sister too, her younger sister. And I think she realized that if she was going to try to pull her younger sister out of that, that she was going to have to be the sole support, and she was going to have a good job to do that. And so, I didn't know at the time that she was being sexually abused, you know what I mean? But I knew something was wrong because I could always tell that she was very just not adjusted as well as my other friends. You know what I mean? I could always kind of pick up on that stuff because I was having the same kind of problems, right? So it wasn't not necessarily incest by my parents, but the thing is there was a lot of abuse in the home. So, I had a lot of sort of a cross section of friends, and I could see by all the different stuff that was going on in their homes the reasons why they were behaving in the way that they were. You know what I mean? It just, you can just sort of see like what happens to kids, like when they how they're growing up and the influences and the environment around them. So yeah, a lot of my friends, they actually went on to college and did their thing, and we kind of split off at that point when we graduated. But I still loved them very much, and I think about them, and I saw their high school pictures and whatnot, really cool. And I'll never forget them. They were awesome people. But yeah, my friends and I, boy, I'm telling you, the ones that I have written about in the book here, I couldn't include every single situation we got ourselves into, but I just didn't want the book. I didn't feel the need to have the book be that long, So I just wanted to keep it short for teens, because most teens just don't have that kind of time to invest in a huge novel. So I thought, no, I want this to be something they can read really quickly, and just to sort of relate and say, okay, I'm not the only one who's experiencing this type of abuse or involved in drug use, and I should reach out. I should get some help, And I just kind of wanted to show the fact that, most of us, we're really just looking for that family that we didn't have at home. You know what I mean? And it was pretty crazy. It was absolutely pretty crazy to see that many kids going through the same types of things that I was, and some worse, And, unfortunate that so many kids end up in that situation. And so, yeah, we could have gotten in trouble quite a bit, with the law. There was a lot of stuff that we'd be doing that, we'd actually get pulled over, and we could have been so busted, especially once I got my car. Before I got my car, it was a little bit more, minor stuff. And that's why I chose this summer to talk about, because I really wanted people to sort of see what happens to kids just before they're that age where they're supposed to be being responsible and, maybe getting a part-time job, thinking about graduating high school and getting their learner's permits and, learning how to drive, the whole responsibility of being behind the wheel and paying for their car. Not everybody's parents buy them a car, and I don't think it's a good idea for parents to buy their kids a car. I think that they should help their kids get a car, but I don't think it's the whole thing of, oh yeah, we'll buy you whatever you want sort of thing, right? It doesn't really teach them anything on how to be responsible. And so, I bought my own car, saved for my own car, and I was pretty happy to do it. I didn't care. I was just happy to have wheels because it was freedom for me. It just meant that I could leave my house at any time, and I could be gone, and I could choose to come home, and if I didn't want to, I could sleep in my car. You know what I mean? So that's the whole thing. It's kind of like a little home on wheels. And so once I got my car, I was pretty much gone. That was pretty much it for hanging around the house. And so what it did mean was that I was out and I had a job partying all the time. And that's what, after we spent this summer hanging around on the block and just some of the stuff that was going on, it was just an abusive summer for me. I chose to write about what was going on with the abuse that was going on, because that summer was just sort of one of the last summers that was just so abusive. And I remember just thinking, being so, I guess, feeling so much like a bad kid, because, my dad was beating on me. My mom was beating on me. They were both physically, abusive and as well cursing me, calling me names, just making me feel like maybe I deserved that, or that I was this horrible kid. And they wouldn't even question their behavior, and they wouldn't even give me a chance to explain my behavior, and they would just lash out. And I wanted to kind of show what happens to teens. It doesn't just happen to small kids. Parents do abuse their teenagers too, and they're not always young parents. Older parents abuse kids too. And I think I just wanted to kind of show people what can happen, to a teenager. My mom was 38 when she had me, and so I was the last child born out of 7. There really were 10, but 3 were stillborn. So the last of 7 kids, there was 18 years between me and my sister, and so my mom when I was 15, 38, my mom would have been 53 years old, and she was beating the crap out of me. And so that is 53, 45, 8 years older than I am right now, and my mom was kicking my ass. And I mean, that just goes to show, that people, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be some young person to abuse your children. Older people abuse kids too. And I really just wanted to, to show people that they can become very violent and very vicious and hurt children too. You know what I mean? This was serious abuse as far as I was concerned, and there was no call for it, absolutely no call for it. And people in my family kind of thought, well, you're just a smart mouth kid, and you just deserve to be treated like that. And nobody would stick up for me at this point because my brothers were gone. And when I was younger, quite often my dad would, if my dad was going to be, trying to spank me with his belt or something, or dragging me through the room to beat on me or whatever, my brothers would stop him. And then, of course, they'd probably be in trouble. I can't remember exactly because the whole situation would become so violent. There would be a fight between them then, right? Because they were trying to stop him from disciplining me as a young child. But I was quite young at that point, and they were trying to protect me, which was really cool. But that all kind of stopped. And one of my brothers, of course, was murdered when I was 8. So he was really my main protector. And when he was murdered, that was it. And then my other brothers were often abusing me. One was sexually molesting me, and the other one was slapping me around like my mom. So my other brother, Howard, who was the next oldest to me, because my sister was 5 years older, and my other brother was just a couple of years older than her, so he was 7 years older than me. He kind of treated me like my mom did, so he was always slapping me around, or if he didn't like something I was doing, he would hit me, and he wasn't necessarily there to protect me, you know what I mean? So the other two brothers weren't as protective, you know what I mean? And I think there was one time when my mom was actually beat me up with the rolling pin, that my brother was in the house, and he did try to come and help me, but my mom actually slammed the door on him and shut him out, so he couldn't come in. I think he wanted to protect me that day, but he was just shut out, so he couldn't get in there to help me out. So other than that, he was quite abusive. Caught me off school grounds one day because I was going with my friend to her place. I actually had permission from my teacher. I had a note from my teacher saying that I could leave with her to go home because she had, which is just a sad situation, but for girls, but she had started her period at school and she needed to go home, and she wanted me to walk with her, and so we were quite young, and I was going to walk home with her, and my brother happened to be walking down the street and saw me off school grounds and beat me up. He's like, I'm telling Mom, right? So when I got home, I was in trouble again, right? So he was quite often hitting me and physically abusive towards me too. So, I wasn't getting any support. Then by this time, by the time I was 15, I was the only one in the house. And so my parents were just so used to talking to me like this. I wanted to include the words that my mom would say because that is so incredibly damaging to a child, to a young person, to have their parents curse at them and threaten them, and to always be treating them as if it's their fault. There's just something so wrong with you that they have to treat you like that. My mom was always like, you guys are just causing me grief, or you're just doing this, or you're just doing that. It's always my fault, and always, And really, we weren't really doing much of anything. You know what I mean? It was all pretty harmless stuff. But she couldn't take any more. She was just at her wit's end. She had a lot of problems with my dad at that point. He was trying to force her to have sex with him. He'd always been doing that. And she was just so tired of the whole thing by that time that she didn't have any patience, right, for any kind of nonsense. So me being in the home was just too much for her. And I think, it would have been smart for me to get out. I really should have let those people intervene for me the few years before. But at the time, it just seemed like the thing to do because my sister was still living at home and around quite a bit. My brother was still there, and there was 3 of us in the home at that time when I was 13. And, my mother never threatened to throw them out, so I thought, no way, she's not throwing me out, you know what I mean? Because that would have been just such a slap in the face because my sister was wanted at home, and that really bothered me because I didn't feel any different than my sister. I didn't feel like I should be treated any worse, that we should be treated differently. I kind of thought that my mom should love my sister and me the same, and she didn't. You know what I mean? So my sister was the favorite, and my mom said she felt sorry for my sister because she was sick as a baby, but I was very sick as a baby too. So I don't see how that could be the case. I think that my sister was, I don't know, for some reason my mom just cared about her more. You know what I mean? And my sister likes to pretend that that's not the truth. Even today we'll say stuff like, no, mom treated us both the same, and it's just not true because I never saw my mom bash my sister's head in with a rolling pin, and I never saw her pound on her. I saw her slap her around a couple of times, but I never saw her pound on her with her fists. And my mom loved to pound on me with her fists. Like, she would really beat me up. And so, I just wanted to include that stuff in there because so many times people like to minimize abuse, and they like to, the world likes to minimize abuse because it's a scary subject to talk about. It makes people uncomfortable because it's truth, right? And it's hurtful. And so nobody wants to see the truth. Nobody wants to see that this is actually happening to kids and worse. And so, I wanted to include it and make sure that it was in there because I wanted people to know how I felt as a teenager, looking at myself in the mirror and looking at this person that I thought, who is this person? Who am I? Am I just this unlovable, unwanted, no good, rotten kid that my mom keeps telling me I am? Or who am I? Am I just this drug user who hangs around on the street with my friends, who is so out of touch with my own sexuality I can't even think about getting into any kind of dating with anybody? And I had all these crushes on these guys, and it was just kind of breaking my heart a little bit because I actually get asked out, by some of these guys would ask me out, and I had to, of course, always turn them down because there's no possible way I could even think about entering into any kind of relationships, even that, sort of beginning teen stuff of just kissing and, fooling around a little bit. I couldn't do it. And so I was very confused at this stage and very much, about the only way I could survive was actually to get high. And so I spent most of my time just looking for a situation or looking for people who had any kind of drugs on them or any kind of anything we could use, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, it was very, very hard. And I think it's just important for people to realize what abuse does to children and what it does to teenagers, and even watching your parents fight all the time, even if the kids aren't being abused, watching their parents fight all the time will do it, because it causes fear, it causes anxiety, and it causes them to, it makes their world unsafe. All of a sudden, these two people who are supposed to create this safe place for this child, if it's not safe, then, their world is unsafe. And pretty soon they don't trust. They learn to not trust anybody or anything, and might go on to abuse their own children because of witnessing the abuse, So it's even worse when the kids are abused too, and there's abuse from both parents. I wanted to show that as well. I wanted to show that it wasn't just my mom abusing me, that my dad was also physically abusive towards me. He wasn't as often physically abusing me as my mom. My dad was more often psychologically abusing me and making me feel kind of like I was evil or there was something wrong with me, and that's what was wrong with the family. Right now, later on, he turned it around and said that the only reason why they moved to New Mexico from Canada in the first place was because I needed to be born and I was a blessing. Now, he has come around and said that now, but when I was growing up, I was the evil one, and I was the one that was causing all the family's problems. So he changed his mind somewhere in there because my dad's mentally ill. He's schizophrenic, and at some point, he changed his mind, and he made his mind up that I was actually a blessing to the family and that he loved me. So that's nice, you know what I mean? I mean, on the other end of it, he's 87 years old now, and that's how he feels about me, so that's wonderful. But at the time, that was not the case. And, when you grow up with your parents telling you you're evil and there's something wrong with you and you're the reason the family's falling apart, and I knew that wasn't true because I had already seen the family falling apart and witnessing it my whole life. But your mind, you sort of start to think, I'm not evil, you know what I mean? And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, why is he doing this? Why are my parents doing this to me? Why are they saying these horrible things? You know what I mean? And I for so long had been getting high already and escaping that way, that really I wouldn't think too much into it, and I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it because it was just too painful at the time. And I would just get high. So I spent most of my youth stoned, or high in some way. And then later on, when I finally quit doing the drugs and whatnot, they really started to hit me, and I actually became suicidal. And I wasn't attempting suicide. I was just planning my suicide. So I had planned many times how I could kill myself. And I went to the Grand Canyon, worked there for almost a year, and thought of almost every night of how I was going to drive my car over the edge of the Grand Canyon. Other people were doing it. I was thinking, hey, I could do that, and I had all these ideas of how I could kill myself. And in the meantime, I would walk through, this has nothing to do with the story, but the thing is this abuse that they put me through right here in this story is, in my whole life before this, up to this age and then past it with the drug use and what I did to myself, is what caused me to want to kill myself for the rest of my life until about 3 or 4 years ago. So I really wanted people to know about the abuse, and I didn't want to try to hide it, and I didn't want the whole book to be just about the abuse either. I wanted to show some of the crazy stuff that my friends were doing that we would get into, and the times that we had just sitting around at the park talking, and we were very much always talking and hanging out and having fun, and we thought it was fun to hang out together. We really enjoyed each other's company, and we all liked each other very much for different reasons. We all thought each other was really cool. And we were like the cool kids, for sure. The rest of the kids were at home doing what they were supposed to be doing. And we were out partying and messing around. And we were actually quite popular. Actually, not popular as far as, like, friends go. We were known as the crowd to kind of stay away from. You know what I mean? So we were kind of like, oh, look at those guys. They're so cool. Like, man, we got to, like, watch our... we were kind of almost a gang. You know what I mean? In certain many ways, and that's why I called the book the Veta Juvies, because that's what our name was, and with the police and everything. So we had our own name, and but yeah, this whole abuse that I suffered my whole life really took its toll on me after I realized what had happened to me and started to think back about the way my parents had made me feel in doing what they did, and for years and years, I wanted to end my life, and that's really sad. And this is what happens to people, and it's just not right. And so that's why I wanted to include the abuse in the book, because so many kids are going through this right now. We know this. And so many kids tonight, teenagers and whatnot, will be abused in their homes and are not being looked after properly, and their parents don't care about them, and they aren't concerned with their future, and they're not even talking about the future. Like, my parents were never talking about the future as far as, like, hey, we got to do this and we got to do that. It was always... that life sucked, right? My parents were always, this life sucks, and you kids just ruined our life. We quite often heard that. They would never talk about the future, and hey, we need to do this, we need to do this. There was no hope for the future. We didn't know anything about the future. My family, we talk about that sometimes. My siblings that are left, that are still here. But we were not encouraged to think about the future. We were not encouraged to think about the good things in life, right? And so, you take that out into the world with you as a teen, and, you're not really thinking about, what can I do to set myself up for life or whatever. I was seriously thinking I wouldn't live to be much past, 30 years old. I had friends actually tell me that. They're like, yeah, you won't live to be 30. And I used to laugh because I'd be like, well, probably not, at the rate that I'm going. And then when I hit 30, when I moved to Canada, I hit 30 years old, and I was like, yes, I made it. I proved them wrong. And so it was awesome. That was a good feeling for sure. But I was still thinking that I should kill myself until the age of 41. Off and on, the memories would come back, and just the pain and the which it still does come back, you know what I mean? But it's not as severe as it used to be, because I've done a lot of healing work, which is I'm so thankful for the people that have been in my life, helping me to get through this and helping me to, supporting me, because it hasn't been my family, I tell you that. And so it's been my friends, and that's who I'm very thankful for. Elizabeth and Donna Shear, Elizabeth Brawley, so many people, Kate Mitchell and Gypsy Witch, and I can't even name them all, to be honest with you, because I have so many awesome friends who have been supporting me the whole way. Karen and Narelle, and I could just go on and on and on and on, and Lynn, and there's just everybody. I could spend a whole 2 days talking about the people that have been supporting me. And, it's very helpful. It's been so helpful because this last year or so I've really made some huge progress in my healing, and I think writing my stories really helped. Getting this stuff out, and allowing my voice to be heard has really made a huge difference in my healing. So I don't feel the same way that I used to as far as wanting to end my life. That's all done and over with, and I'm now really happy to say that I'm fighting now to help other people see that that's never the answer. That suicide is never the answer. And so many teens will commit suicide. And even younger than that, young children actually do commit suicide because of bullying or, abuse within their homes. They're not being looked after. They're just being abused and mistreated. And some kids actually kill themselves. And, teens, will kill themselves too. And it's a serious issue, and suicide is never the answer. And I'm so thankful that I was smart enough to stick around long enough because I kept saying, I can handle this. I've been through worse. And as I would be sitting here with these just depressed states, thinking that I could end my life, I'd be like, no, something would just be like, no, we can't do that. We'll just keep going and keep going, right? So something was just pushing me along all the time to not go through with it. I'm so thankful. And I think it's just the fact that I realized the pain that it caused me when my brother committed suicide, even though he was, I believe, my molester because of something that he said to me. But and I think it was him. I used to think it was my dad who sexually molested me, and I wanted to believe that because I hated my dad for so long. I hate what he did. I hate what my dad did to the family, but I don't hate him personally. And I had to do that in order to save my life. I had to take that hate and turn it into something else because the hatred that I had for my family was killing me personally. It was ripping me up and tearing me up inside my heart because it wasn't allowing me to heal and to move forward. So what I thought about was the fact that I didn't hate my family and I love them very much. And I had to be honest with myself, and that's the truth. So I couldn't lie to myself or anybody else. I love my family very much. I just hated what they did, and I hated what they did to each other and what they did to me. And so I thought my dad actually was the person who molested me for a while when I was, sort of my late teens and into my early 20s until my brother said something to me that changed my mind and made me feel like, no, it had to be him because why would he say that to me? All I know is somebody sexually molested me when I was 8 years old, and I still haven't been able to put a face with the person. So I think it was definitely one of my brothers, and I think I know which one. So I think it's the one who killed himself, but I don't think that's why he killed himself. He had been always trying to kill himself, and he was just mentally, he was not mentally well. He was very mentally ill. He had so many problems. Growing up in the home that we grew up in, it's no wonder. He's the one that actually reported the abuse, and the DHS, CPS, whoever was, stepped in when I was a toddler, and he was in middle school or something. And these, the teacher and the nurse got involved, called the authorities, they got involved, and my dad had it in for him big time ever after that. So I remember the abuse that my dad would inflict on him, and I was just a very small kid watching this. And let me tell you, it's really scary when you see your parent going and stomping on your brothers, kicking them around, beating on them with belts, and just really physically, violently abusing them. And that's what he would do to my brother. And my brother, it's really quite sad and quite pathetic that he didn't get any help, and he went on to use drugs, and then he ended up killing himself at the age of 33. And that's very sad. He was just young, and he was like such an old man. When I see the pictures, there's only a few photos that I have of him, and he just seemed like such an old man at the age of 18, 17 years old. He was already like an old man, and everybody in my family looked like that. My other brother was 1 year older than him, and he's the one that was murdered when I was 8 years old, and he was 1 year older than my other brother. They both look like old men, you know what I mean? Because that's what abuse will do to you when you grow up around abusive parents who are steadily abusing the family and each other. It takes its toll. It really does. And my brothers, you could see it like in their eyes, when you look in their eyes, that there was a lot of problems. And all three of my brothers that I have pictures of that were growing up in the home when I was growing up in the home, when I look at their photos, I can see what's going on behind their eyes because I was there and I experienced it, and I know the hatred and and the horror that was going on in our home at any given time. And so it's no wonder that my brother, it's really no wonder that he killed himself. And this is unfortunate. So really, for any teens out there, if you happen to be listening to this and you're a teenager and you're struggling with this issue, and suicide is never ever the answer. And it doesn't matter. I don't want to say I don't care how hard your life has been or anything like that, because I know how hard people's lives are. What I'm saying is that we've survived the worst of it. And I like to fall back on, different websites out there who for survivors of child abuse, right, who say you've survived the worst of it, and now it's time to allow yourself to heal and to move forward at whatever pace you're comfortable with, and to get the help that you need, whether it's a therapist or counselor, group support, which I really like, online group support, because it's very anonymous and you can just go on when you want to, and just a matter of reaching out and getting some help and not allowing yourself to spiral downward and spin out of control and ruin your life like so many of my friends did. Who knows what happened to most of my friends? Most of them, I just can't find them. I've actually tried and tried looking them up and locating them, and I can't find any of them. So it's really unfortunate. I've even tried friends of friends who they can't locate them either. So it's just like nobody knows where they're at. And it's very sad and unfortunate. These people that were in this book are actually not locatable, and it's very sad. And I wish them the best of everything. I just know, like, the lifestyle that we were living, it was not going to be very good. You know what I mean? If they didn't get out and get some help, and many of them went on to continue their lifestyles of doing drugs and whatnot. And I was just they would be like, I don't know how you can do it. Like, you got off of, you're not doing drugs, and you quit smoking, and look at you. You're drug free. Well, we can't seem to do that. I think they wanted to, but they, for some reason, they just couldn't do it. It was just so hooked, And so it's very sad. We sort of split off, and kind of had to, because I had to sort of quit hanging around with them. Their behavior was so violent, and I couldn't take any more violence. I was so tired of it, and I just was so tired of people being violent towards me and other people that I knew. I was just really sick and tired of it. And I think what it was is I was at the point where I couldn't take any more. Like, I was up to the very tip top of my head, to the top of my scalp. Right at the top of my head was saturated with abuse and violence, and I could not take any more. And I thought, I can't hang around with people who are going to be violent. And a lot of my friends were very violent and doing violent things to each other. And a friend of that one friend of mine, Jo, in the book, she ended up in a relationship with this guy who was abusive, and he was abused as a child, and he was the drug addict who was using intravenous drugs, and he was, his life was pretty much almost over if he wasn't going to get off of them. So who knows if he's even living today. I mean, I don't know. All I know is I liked that guy. I felt sorry for him, but he was very abusive to me as well as to her, and actually anybody who would challenge him. And because I was his girlfriend's best friend, I was a threat to him. And so he was not always threatening my life, but he did a couple of times, and was physically abusive towards me as well. So I thought, I can't take anymore. I have to stop hanging around with people who are, even though I love them, but people who are just causing me more pain, and I can't take anymore, so I have to get out. Something was just telling me that I had to get out of that lifestyle, and I had to, in order to save my life, that I needed to make that change. And I'm thankful. I'm very, very thankful for it. And, it's a struggle, and people would say, well, I'm still addicted to cigarettes, right? I mean, I'm still addicted. I still have an addiction problem. But the thing is I'm off the drugs, and I'm very thankful to be off of drugs, and I don't allow myself to drink that much because I always want to fall back on something. So if I wasn't using drugs, it'd be alcohol. So I don't allow myself to drink that much, just for, the odd drink during the year to celebrate or whatever. But I otherwise don't allow myself to keep it around, because I would just be drinking all the time. I just have an addiction problem. So I'm still very much an addicted person. I just smoke cigarettes, that's all. I'm just on the right side of the law now. But, I mean, I used to, I very much had a real problem with drugs. And so my friends were like, we don't know how you did it, and I was just like, well, you have to get serious, and you have to say no. You can't keep doing it if you really want to quit. And the same with the cigarettes, right? I mean, I actually quit for 14 months just not too long ago. But started up again, And it's a hard battle. It really is, because it's like, well, if I don't do that, when I was off of them for the 14 months, I was feeling pretty good. As far as my, my breathing and everything was a lot better. But then again, my nerves were shot, and so my body was starting to freak out, and actually had a situation where my body kind of freaked out and my feet turned black, right? So they puffed up and turned black. So I mean, I don't know. There's something like the cigarettes do something for me that I actually need, and that must be just something to keep me calm. And I don't want to take another pill, so I don't want to start taking pills. You know what I mean? Like that's the whole issue. Is I'm trying to stay very much away from that stuff. So I think what it is I just need to take some time at some point in my life where hopefully I can take some time and work through some of this stuff without pills, and work through my addiction problem. I don't want to replace one addiction with another. And so that's the whole issue is I'd like to be able to work it out naturally and work it out for good in my mind so that I know, hey, I don't need that, right? But to really be honestly be able to say it, I don't need those. I don't need that. I don't have an addiction problem anymore. And I think that'd be so wonderful because I've been addicted my whole life, since I was like 12 years old, addicted to something. And I know it stems back to the abuse that I suffered. I'm absolutely positive. It has everything to do with my nerves, right? So, and my nervous system and just the whole coping mechanisms, But I would hope that teenagers out there, if you're listening to this, you don't want to have a messed up life. You don't want, I was not given an option as a child, to say, my parents didn't say, okay, well, what kind of a life would you like to have? We'll either bring you up in a home that's wonderful, or we'll abuse you. Which one would you choose? I mean, I would love to come from a home that was just, so much better, but it just didn't happen. So we can't change the past, right? But we can change the future. And we can change what we do. We can't change what other people do. I can't go back and change what my parents did. I can't go back and change what happened between me and my friends and the crazy stuff that we did. I was completely honest in the book, about the stuff that I was doing, and I was quite often stealing. I wasn't a klepto, that's for sure. I had friends who were kleptomaniacs, and they would steal everything. They even had half of my jewelry over at their place. I'd go to their house and find my jewelry or my sister's jewelry, and I'd just take it back, and I'd be like, this is mine. They'd be like, oh, yeah, it is. And I'd be like, yeah, I'm taking it home. Oh, okay. I'd go back and scope through their place to see what belonged to me and take it back home. I had friends who were big-time kleptos, and I wasn't a klepto, but I used to steal, and I didn't feel, it didn't make me feel proud or feel good about myself, and I have to be honest, I've done some absolutely crazy things in my lifetime, that's just not right, but I'm not the world's worst person either, but I figure, hey, we got to be honest with ourselves and, honest with other people and be transparent, right? I was not a perfect kid. I don't think I deserve to be beat on like that or abused or mistreated like I was. I think that I needed help, you know what I mean? And as far as the drug use goes and whatnot, like I would never steal money for drugs. Like I would never rob my mom's purse or, because my brothers were always doing that. So, I didn't want to be like my brothers. Like I didn't want to be that bad, that I would take my mom's money out of her. She didn't have very much money and, to be stealing her money for drugs and stuff, that's what my brothers would do. And they'd like hawk her jewelry. Anything that she didn't have on, my brothers would get a hold of it if she didn't hide it, and they'd go hawk it. They did the same thing to my sister as well. Like my sister, everything that she had, they would, if it was worth anything, they would go and hawk it. And they would get their drug money, or they'd sell it. So my sister had to like hide all of her stuff because she was the only one with any money, because she got a job when she was pretty young. She got like a part-time job, and she was always saving her lunch money. My mom would give her lunch money and she would save it. She wouldn't eat lunch and she would buy clothes with it, and jewelry and stuff. So she was very skinny. Like she never ate anything except for candy bars, I think. And then my mom wouldn't give me any lunch money. I'd just get a sandwich or whatever. So I didn't get any money. And so I didn't have any money, but I still wouldn't steal any off of her, you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't take money out of her purse or wallet. It just was so much not something I would do. And I would never take money from somebody that I knew or take money from people's homes. It just wasn't something that I would do. It's very uncool to me. I just thought it was not right. But I wasn't beyond stealing at stores. I would walk into stores and take 6 packs of Cokes and walk out. I was just very much into a grab and go type of thing, if we wanted booze, and we would just go, and if we saw like back in those days, people would set up their booze right in front of the doors, like at 7-Elevens and Circle K's. They used to sell alcohol at those stores And so you could go buy alcohol at 7-Elevens and whatnot. And I don't know if you can now, but you used to be able to. And they would set it up by the front doors, and what we would do is just walk by and grab some and split. And we would have our booze for the night. These types of things, right? It's just, stupid stuff that, most kids, if we had gotten caught, we would have been in trouble for. Wasn't the worst trouble in the world, not like killing people or anything like that. But we weren't making the best decisions for ourselves as far as our futures went, and nobody wants to have a record for this kind of stuff. Then you have to try to prove you're trustworthy if you do get caught doing this kind of stuff, it's really hard for people to trust you later on as an adult if you're a thieving person when you're younger, and it's you have to be able to say no, I've changed, you know what I mean, and realize that hey, it's wrong. And so I would hope that if teens are listening to this, you don't want to get involved in all that stuff, because it will follow you and it will haunt you for the rest of your life, and it's not cool, right? To me, what used to be cool to me is totally what's not cool to me right now. You know what I mean? Because I'm looking back thinking, isn't that just sad? You know what I mean? That people would think that that's cool when actually what's really cool to me now is seeing kids who are working really hard to do the best they can with what they have to make this world a better place, to make their own lives a better life for themselves. So many kids don't come from good homes, and yet you see them, they're working so hard to try to, they're young, they're just out of their teens, 19, 20 years old, grew up abused or in an abusive environment, grew up poor, and they work really, really hard to try to make a good life for themselves. And I think, to me, that's really cool. You know what I mean? Not this whole business of, hey, let's go out and see how many people we can hurt. Let's go out and see how many people we can, mess up, right? It's like, no, that's so wrong. And there's just nothing cool about it. And what I used to think was cool back in the old days, I absolutely think is totally not cool now. And, I wouldn't promote any of this stuff, it's not cool. And to me, it's like so bad to be hurting people. And I mean, I knew what it was like to be hurt. And, I didn't intentionally hurt people really too much. I mean, me and my friend used to scare kids and stuff as far as that went. But really, that was all just stupidity. We weren't necessarily really out stabbing people or hurting people, whereas a lot of times, you see these young kids out here doing this stuff, taking it to the next level, taking it to that next stage of becoming the actual criminal, the actual murderer, the person who is the abuser, And to me, that is just so wrong. It's like life is hard enough, and people just don't deserve to be treated like that in any case, So I would hope the teens out there would really think about the decisions that they make, think very clearly about what direction that they're taking, and try to enjoy this life and not, put too much pressure on themselves, and not put too much pressure on, well, I should be doing this, or I should be here by now, and this and that. It's like, no, just do the best you can with what you have, and try to enjoy it, and have fun and not ruin it with drug use and getting into trouble and all that, because that is so not cool. And, back in the old days, there were all the stuff on the TV was all about that, kids getting into trouble, and MTV was just coming out and just starting out. And when I was in my middle to late teens, and MTV was just so popular. And, of course, everything on there was all about, kids in trouble and kids on the street, and, it kind of promoted that lifestyle. So in the meantime, we're living it already, but yet we're kind of thinking, hey, this is so cool because we fit into this picture. So it kind of did change our attitude, and, to thinking that, hey, we were really cool, and that the worse we could be, the better off it was going to be, right? And so, people, I mean, we'd end up in hotel rooms with drug dealers and guns, and, I mean, the situation actually got extremely bad later on, and I didn't go into that in this book, actually, because this book was just right before that happened, and I sort of wanted to sort of show what was happening to us just prior to us, making those decisions to go in those directions, right? And this is the point where really at this point we could have got help, and I think before it got really out of hand, had our parents been there for us, this just shows the point where we really could have made the decisions that we needed to make to not get into any further trouble, to stop doing the drugs, to help ourselves out, But instead of that, we didn't have any help. The life just continued on the way it was for all of us, and it got worse for some of us, for some of my friends. that, sent them off spiraling kind of downward in their life as well. And so we all, of course, stuck together like glue and continued on spiraling further downward on a heavy duty bad situation with drug use and whatnot. So that's the thing, it's not good, it's not funny, and I know not every teen out there has a parent who cares about them, or has two parents that care about them. This is a fact, and that's why I really wanted this book to kind of just show people that, hey, this happens to people like me. It's not some person who, on the TV who you just think, oh yeah, this is just so typical, like a movie or whatever, right? I mean, it just happens to people like myself and my friends. It should have never happened, and none of us deserve to be treated the way that we were. And really, we needed more support. We needed support from our family, so that we wouldn't have had to be out there on the streets running around looking for that support with each other. We would have still been friends probably, but I don't think we would have gotten in so much trouble, and we would have not done so many drugs had we had a lot more support at home and less abuse, right? And I just know the kids are going through this right now, and it's so sad. It's really quite unfortunate that parents can't develop these relationships with their kids way long before the teen years, because those were the relationships with your teens. I mean, if you don't develop that relationship before your kids hit their teens, you're in trouble. Because there's a whole period where the kids don't want to hear nothing from the parents. And it's right around the teen years where they start to feel like, hey, I've had enough listening to you. I'm going to make my own decisions. I need to grow up here. And if the parents haven't been there for them all along, they won't quite often include their parents on their decisions that they're making. And that's why they end up getting into quite a bit of trouble. And so, the parents need to be there for their kids all the way through and say, look, as a family unit, each person represented equally within the family as far as that goes, each person being just as important within that family. You can't expect to be beating on your children and calling them names, cussing them out, and then expect them to listen to you as a teenager. They probably won't, right? They're not going to listen to a thing you say, and they probably will go and do the exact opposite of what you say just to further the problem, because that's what happens to a lot of teens. Their attitudes just go completely the opposite way, and they're just like, look, you want to, look what you've done to me my whole life, and now you expect me to listen to you? I'm not listening to a thing you say, and I'm actually going to do the opposite, and I'll just go the other way. And that can happen, it's and it's sad, and people think, oh, well, look at those teens, look at the trouble that they're in, look how they're behaving. People would quite often say stuff like that to me and my friend, without even realizing what kind of homes that we were growing up in. And what kind of situation, we were growing up in. And a lot of people thought, that actually knew about the abuse. There were people that did know how my parents were treating me and thought that I actually just deserved to be treated like that, which I can't imagine. You know what I mean? It's just incredibly wrong to think that a kid deserves to be treated that way in any instance. Children, and teens do not deserve to be abused. It's like they don't deserve that at all. They need love. They need care. They need concern. They need protection. They need, guidance. Guidance being very important, especially at that point. They just need support, and they don't need abuse, right? So that's the whole issue. That's why I really want to focus on books for teens and books for youth, all sort of surrounding the issues of abuse and substance abuse. And I hope to be able to do more books. I know that Donna Shear is really one of my biggest fans, and Donna Shear is the president for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and she's an author, best-selling author. She's also she writes for many different magazines around the country in the U.S., and she's written many books and co-authored many books with Sandra Dawn Potter, the CEO and founder. But Donna Shear also writes her own books as well, and she's an author, and she's I'd say one of my biggest, she is my biggest supporter as far as my writing goes. And so it's just awesome, to have that support. And she always is encouraging me to keep writing and to keep going. And it believes that, I have something that's worth saying, and something that we all do, that we all have something worth saying, and that we're worth bringing up and work because it can help people. So I mean that's very nice, and I love that the support. I appreciate it very much because I don't have anybody else really who's encouraging me except for my sweetheart, who does encourage me to continue on and keep going, and he's very much a huge part of my life as far as my support system goes. He does support what I'm doing, my sweetheart, and but he's he it's nice to have someone he's not an author, right? So it's nice to have Donna Shears backing me up, because she's an author and she knows, she's been there. And so it's really nice to have that support from somebody who's actually in the industry and knows what it's all about. And so I really appreciate it. She's very encouraging me to keep writing. So I hope to be able to continue to write and hopefully, books for kids and teens dealing with issues of bullying and, substance abuse, domestic violence and child abuse and whatnot, and just keep writing. And I may write just more fictional stuff, and instead of my own stories. But I really wanted to write a few, like this one here. I knew that I wanted to write about this one summer at Veta Juvies because this was such a huge. It was a summer that, kind of was the pivotal point between where I could have gone one way had I had support from my parents and got off of the drugs and actually started doing something really constructive with my life. If had the abuse not been there and had they been treating me right, and the love and the care been there and the concern been there from the beginning, I know that I wouldn't have been doing that. And so this summer was sort of the last summer of, and it wasn't even innocence because none of us were innocent. We all grew up in these homes that were completely abusive in different ways, right? And so it was sort of the last summer of being a kid before we hit the the next year and the year after, where we became a lot more cynical. We became a lot more unhappy as far as our personal lives went. We doing a whole lot more drugs and getting into way more trouble. And this was the one summer where we were actually still kind of like kids, still running around, enjoying hanging out on the block and just sitting around together on the street and looking at the sky and talking about life and having fun and eating, ice cream and hanging out, and we were still doing drugs and we were still up to no good most of the time, but we were still kind of kids, and even myself, that was sort of the last year that I sort of felt that I was almost still a kid, before the next year came. And my friends, I just wanted to sort of elaborate on what had happened to them towards the end of the book, because they so many horrible things happened to my friends, It's just absolutely horrible. When I got the news that my friend had been shot down in his driveway and killed in a drug deal gone bad, it was my friend in the book, Joe, who called me, who told me that our friend had been killed and murdered in his driveway, and it just was such a shock. I knew he was a heavy-duty drug user. I knew he was having a lot of problems. He was in a band, and they were going to be very famous. They were like better than Metallica. They were like super, super. We're talking extreme metal. But they could do Metallica, like they made Metallica look easy. Metallica's work, they created their own stuff and had their own CD, and then my friend got shot and killed in his driveway. So, it's kind of sad, right? I mean, he had a chance to go on and do what he wanted to do, which was be in a band and play guitar. He loved to play guitar, and he was a good guy, and I really loved him. He was not my boyfriend or anything like that, but he was very close to me. We hung out a lot, and he was actually teaching me how to play guitar, and he was just a nice guy. Like, he was very, we did not go out as boyfriend, girlfriend, or anything like that, but we just liked each other. We got along really well as friends. We were just friends. And but he trusted me, I could trust him. We were like friends. We could tell each other anything, and he was just like a really good friend of mine. So I was just devastated when my friend phoned to tell me that he had been killed, and she actually used to date him, so they were going out, and she really cared about him. He's a nice guy, and so I know she was just devastated to hear that. And then we had some other stuff happen to some more of our friends that was just horrible, and one of our friends was killed in a domestic violence abuse situation. And we had no concept that this was going on, because we weren't paying attention. We were too busy getting high and doing our drugs, and we weren't paying attention. And she was killed and murdered by her partner. And so, these were all these teens that I used to hang around with, and that their lives could have been so much different had they had support and had they had And people would say, oh, well, but really would their lives have been different? And it's like, I just think so, yes, because I don't think kids do these terrible things and get involved in these situations when they have a supportive family. Sometimes they do. But that many, I mean, come on, like almost all the kids that I knew, and that's why it was so important for me to be their voice, right? I really wanted to. That's why I wanted to do this book, the Veta Juvies, because, you know, it kind of to be their voice as well, right? Because they were very important to me, and like I said in the book, actually, they were my family, and way more than my own family was, right? So, kind of a nice thing to be able to be their voice too, and so that was why it was important. Kind of seemed to be important for me to write this story and to put it out for teens, right? Because I know so many teens have these friends in their lives, and these friends are sometimes more like their family, you know. And this is the whole issue with gangs and whatnot. You know, they're getting something that they need from these people that they're not getting at home. Unconditional love and support. You know, protection quite often, you know, just different things like that, just that love and friendship and you know, acceptance. And, you know, they'll accept you for who you are, whereas a lot of times in your own home, you know, parents or family members will not accept you for who you are, and they don't accept you. And so, you know, there was a lot of acceptance. We all accepted each other. We knew what kind of homes we all had and were growing up in, and the lack of support that was there. And some of the parents were trying, you know, and some weren't. And we knew the ones that were and the ones that weren't. And so, you know, it was a hard situation for all of us. We had more friends, actually, I mentioned there, and one of them actually, excuse me, I'm just getting thirsty here. After 2 hours, yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate this. It's a long show, 2 hours. But, yeah, the one guy that I talked about that wanted to go and it was his idea that we go collect these funds from door to door, and like a donation type thing. We would just go door to door and get donations, and we would take the money. Well, we actually gave some of the money to the actual thing, but we kept some of it. But that's really bad. I mean, really bad. And but I thought, hey, honesty is everything to me, and we have to be honest. If we're not going to be honest, what do we have? Absolutely nothing. Truth is everything to me. And so I had to be truthful there and tell that little part on us, you know. But the thing is this guy that suggested that his mom had bashed his head in with a frying pan not too long. I think it was after that. He had came over to the block and he had a big old gash on his head. And we both agreed that we had the same kind of mothers, because I said, well, my mom bashed my head in with a rolling pin, and he's like, yeah, my mom bashed my head in with a frying pan. And these are the kind of people, you know, the kind of parents that we had, you know, growing up. And I mean, some of my friends had actually experienced worse abuse than myself, and that's just the whole issue. I knew that, you know. And so when you grow up with that many abused people, and you know a lot of people who have experienced a lot of abuse, and it's just part of your life and it's part of their lives, you know, you spend a lot of time in that situation, so you do tend to know a lot about it. People would, you know, I'm sure that people who don't know me and have just kind of come across my work and seen what I'm doing probably think, where did she get all this information, and how would somebody know about all this stuff? And it's like when you spend your whole life in it, you definitely have a huge background knowledge on the whole thing, and especially when you actually allow yourself to see it. And it's not because I had to I had to allow myself to experience it and allow myself to go through the healing process enough to take a look at it in order as my own abuse, not my friends. I could talk about theirs, but a lot of, you know, going public with my story. You know, I needed to do it. I had to do it it was killing me to keep this all in there, right? Knowing all this stuff and having gone through all this, and knowing that I could hopefully help people by making a difference, you know, and just being a voice, one more voice to say, hey, we got to stop the silence. We have to stop the cycle of abuse. You know, we got to we have to stop child abuse, right? I mean, it's so fundamentally basic, right? Well, this is not caveman days. People should stop abusing their children and their partners, and people should stop abusing everybody. I just don't agree. I don't condone abuse of any kind, you know, and I can't condone abuse. Abuse to me, it's just so horrible. It's so barbaric, you know, and caveman type stuff, you know what I mean? There's no reason to be battering anybody. And there's no reason to be battering children and teens just because you don't like what they're doing or like what they're saying, or just because you don't like your children, which was the case, for most of my friends that were abused. Their parents just didn't want them around the house either. So we totally related with each other because they knew what kind of home I grew up in, and I knew what kind of home they grew up in. So we totally knew the score. We knew what was happening. And almost all of my friends had been abused, which is just crazy. One of my friends who I met just shortly after this summer, we met. I didn't mention him, but he was our good friend, and he lived in the house that I used to live in, and which is just bizarre because he moved into this house that we moved out of to move back on this one street, and I call it the house from hell. I actually mentioned that in the book, A Life of Death, The Redemption. And him and his sister and his mom moved into this house that we used to live in that was the house of hell for me when I was growing up. So I went over there to talk to them one time, and they were saying, they said, this house is weird. And I said, yeah, well, it's no wonder. It is very bizarre. It's probably our vibes we left behind, as a, just the violence and the abuse that was going on there. It was a very strange house. And they said, yeah, we noticed that there was blood on the carpet. And I was like, well, yeah, that was mine. It was just trippy, and it was just bizarre. And they were, it turns out that her son had been stabbed by his father, and that's why his mom had divorced his dad, because my friend was being abused by his father, and his father actually stabbed him in the back. And I actually saw the stab wound, but I didn't know what it was from. And so she told me what it was from, and that's just so sad. So most of my friends had been abused in some way. And then people like to think that there's no such thing as abuse, and I can't even count the amount of people that I know that personally and grew up with who were abused, and just in my neighborhood alone. I mean, it's such a joke to me when I hear people, talking about the fact that there's no such thing as child abuse and it just doesn't exist, and so it's okay to stab your children and to beat on them, pummel them, hit them in heads with frying pans, burn them, sexually use them. No, it's not okay. It will never be okay. And it's I just think that the world needs to start seeing children as precious gifts, really, to the family, because that's what they are. And the world needs to stop looking at children as just these things you just punch around and kick around and sexually use when you're in the mood or whatever. It's incredibly wrong what people are doing to their children, and I will never, ever stop speaking out against this. I was silent for just without talking to my own friends, which I did mention that I do talk to my friends and have talked to my friends over the years forever about the abuse I suffered in my home. But I have, I will never be publicly silenced again. I will be a voice as long as I can be, along with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children and all of us there, to raise our voices and to say that we have to stop child abuse. We have to break the silence. We have to break the chains of silence, which is really what abuse is all about. Is keeping everybody just wants to keep it all hidden away, and nobody wants to know about it. But the sad fact is my whole life I've known actually nothing but abuse, and nothing but people who were abused, and the odd people that actually happen to not be abused, which is just a miracle. But it's really sad, and I know so many people out there right now are being abused, and so that's why I just wanted to be one more hope, for people, one more voice to say, reach out, get some help, don't suffer in silence and suffer alone. Thanks everybody for tuning in. You can. There's a couple different places you'll be able to get a hold of the book. It will be on Amazon.com. It's called Veta Juvies, and that's Laveta, and then Juvies, Juvies. And that's my latest book, and it's available at Lulu.com, Shear and Potter Books as well. You can also pick it up from a couple different places where you can get, like on Dreamcatchers for Abused Children's website, you can pick up the link there for Shear and Potter Books for all the books for Dreamcatchers, which you will want to check out. We have a new website called Books for Teens. Donna Shear put this together. It's http://books-4-teens.webs.com, and there's two books on there that Donna Shear and Sandra Potter co-wrote, and these books are awesome. They are about teen dating violence, both of them. One is it's kind of like he said, she said. One is the girls, sort of the girl's view and what she's going through. The other one is the boy's view and what he's going through, and he's actually the abuser, but she is kind of in her way too. And so, you want to get a hold of that book, and it's just awesome. Actually, there's two books, and they're a set. They're like $15, which is not expensive. And you can get my book at http://Veta-Juvies.com/product/Veta-Juvies/12913-561. Or you can grab my link here from my website for A Life of Death Redemption, and that will take you to my books on Shear and Potter, books on Lulu.com. So thanks everybody for tuning in here, and I had Donna Shear sitting here listening to me, and as well as Elizabeth Brawley. Thank you guys very much for being here. I love you. You're my sisters, and you're my family, and I just love you so much. I appreciate your support and everything that you're doing to help stop child abuse every day, and I appreciate your support that you've given to me over this last year. I thank you very much, because without it, I don't know if I'd be where I am today. Thank you so much. And everybody, thanks so much for tuning into all my shows. I almost have 12,000 shows listened to, which is just absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for tuning into all my stuff and listening to me day after day, and just for being here for me. I really appreciate it. Have a great night, everybody, and have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.